Putin running out of weapons as slow and noisy Iran drones easily destroyed by Ukraine. Drone strikes in Kyiv last week killed at least 4 people, including a pregnant woman. Russia is continuing to target Ukraine with Iranian-built drones in a clear indication that Vladimir Putin is running low on weaponry, the UK's Ministry of Defence has said. And one military analyst has predicted Moscow's haphazard use of the Shahed 136 unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, was not only fairly ineffective but would also serve to harden Western resolve and result in the supply of more military equipment to Ukrainian forces. A tweeted mod statement said Russia was probably using UAVs to infiltrate Ukrainian air defenses and as a substitute for Russian-manufactured long-range precision weapons which are becoming increasingly scarce. Ukrainian efforts to contain the UAVs have been successful, the ministry added. They tweeted, Russia continues to use Iranian uncrewed aerial vehicles, UAVs, against targets throughout Ukraine. Ukrainian efforts to defeat the Shahed 136 UAVs are increasingly successful. Official sources, including President Zelensky, claiming that up to 85% of attacks are being intercepted. These UAVs are slow, noisy and fly at low altitudes, making lone aircraft easy to target conventional air defenses. Russia is likely expending a high number of Iranian Shahed 136 UAVs in order to penetrate increasingly effective Ukrainian air defenses. It is likely using them as a substitute for Russian-manufactured long-range precision weapons which are becoming increasingly scarce. The United States last week said Iranian military trainers were in Crimea helping Russian forces operate the drones. But Sam Cranny-Evans, a research fellow at UK-based think tank the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, told Express.co.uk that so far at least, they were doing so with limited success. He explained, the way they are being used is fairly ineffective. They are causing terror to be sure, as it is hard to predict their flight path and they can be sent from a long distance. They can also be flown in waves, which is hard even for good air defense. However, Mr. Cranny-Evans emphasized, strategically, their use, along with cruise missiles against cities again, has hardened Western attitudes and led to more equipment pledges, which won't help Russia. My current assumption is that the Russian command and control is not good enough to enable the use of these drones on the front line where they might actually help. But that could be wrong, and it could change. Describing the way in which the drones work, he explained, they're slow and loud, which means that they can theoretically be intercepted with more ease than cruise missiles, and they use quite simple civilian electronics. But honestly, the efficacy of any weapon is based on how it's used. The most advanced cruise missile in the world is wasted if the targeting data is off or old. Mr. Evans suggested Russia's command and control structure, in other words, the system in place to select and hit targets, was hampering its efforts. He said, the system starts with identifying the target, making sure it's the right target. This information needs to be kept current. Then, the right weapon needs to be selected for that target, brought to a suitable area and launched. Once launched, the drone needed to be directed to the target and then in the final stages, the complexity of the weapon shaped how effective it is in engaging, he continued. Mr. Evans added, so, with Russia, it's not clear that a lot of those first stages are involved in the launch of the Shahed 136, they often seem to be simply flown to Kyiv using pre-programmed routes before crashing into whatever they were programmed to attack. Speaking to Express.co.uk last Monday, former U.S. Marine John Sennett, who lives in Kyiv with Belarusian wife Natasha, described hearing several drones, including one which crashed into a nearby building killing at least 4 people including a pregnant woman. Mr. Sennett, 57, said, at I guess about 6.30, 6.45 this morning we heard this buzzing noise and then literally maybe 3 minutes later a huge explosion. And so we ran into the hallway and we heard another buzzing noise and then another explosion, probably 700 meters from where we live, I'm guessing about that. They sound like a little motor scooter, like a moped, like the older ones that are a little bit louder. One literally went right over our place, you hear them going and then you hear the explosion. Ukraine's advances in recent weeks around Kherson and in the country's northeast have been met with intensifying Russian missile and drone attacks on civilian infrastructure, which have destroyed about 40% of Ukraine's power system ahead of winter. On Sunday, Ukraine's General Staff said anti-aircraft defenses had shot down 12 of Russia's Iranian-made Shahed 136 attack drones in the past 24 hours. Tehran denies supplying the weapons to Russia. Putin's ponderous army savaged as Russians have zero stomach for joining Ukraine war. The botched partial mobilization plan aimed at recruiting another 300,000 troops has been ripped apart. Vladimir Putin's ponderous army has been brutally mocked after he was warned Russians have zero stomach for joining the fight in the war with Ukraine. Russia has suffered significant losses over recent weeks and has been driven backwards in the conflict by heroic counter-offensives from Ukrainian forces. Thousands of Russians have also been seen rushing for the borders and attempting to flee the country as the rebellion against the war with Ukraine picks up pace. This was even more evident when Putin used a public address to the nation last month to announce a partial mobilization of reservists in Russia and the need for 300,000 new troops to join his war in Ukraine. Retired U.S. Army officer Ben Hodges, who served as commanding general in the U.S. Army Europe, has torn apart the partial mobilization plan, warning it will turn out to be another in a long list of strategic mistakes by the Kremlin. He added the dramatic images of hundreds of thousands of men fleeing Russia to avoid being drafted show the population has zero stomach for joining the Russian army to fight in Ukraine. Lieutenant General Hodges told Express.co.uk, not only will Putin's partial mobilization turn out to be another in a long list of strategic mistakes by the Kremlin, but also the way it was rolled out. You would think something so big and as important as that would be skillfully deployed. Yet Putin's message was incoherent, the numbers have been conflicting and the execution of it has been terrible. We have seen pictures and videos of what these guys have waiting for them. Then the image of 500,000 military males leaving Russia by car, foot or aeroplane to avoid it. That demonstrates the Russian population has zero stomach for joining the Russian army to fight in Ukraine. The former U.S. Army officer also took at Russia's logistics system, claiming it is totally exhausted, completely incapable of sustaining large-scale land operations. He hailed Ukrainian forces who have very skillfully attacked the whole network, claiming it has reduced Russia's large ponderous army to being completely ineffective. Commanding General Hodges continued, Russia's logistics system is totally exhausted and completely incapable of sustaining large-scale land operations. It wasn't designed to do that outside of Russia, and the Ukrainians have very skillfully attacked the whole logistics network, the railways, ammunition storage sites. For a large ponderous army that depends on mass artillery, when your logistics are impacted, you are completely ineffective, and we are seeing that, he continued. Secondly, the inability or even unwillingness to conduct what we would call joint operations where you integrate the effect of the Navy, Army, Air Force, Special Forces. I don't think there has been a single day since February 24 where they have integrated their capabilities. Everyone is doing their own thing, and this is a reflection of the culture within the services but also a real lack of high-level, high-scale operational experience and exercises. Colonel Richard Kemp, a retired British Army officer who served for nearly 30 years until 2006, warned Russia is in big trouble, with Putin's troops appearing not to be able to resist the serious advances from Ukraine. He hit out at the botched mobilization from the Russian president, claiming it is adding to the growing discontent in the Russian ranks. The British Army veteran told Express.co.uk, Russia is in big trouble because Ukraine has been making serious advances in both the northeast and in the south. Russia does not seem to be capable and have enough troops to resist Ukraine's advances at present. When you combine this with the botched mobilization, you are seeing much greater discontent there as a result of what is happening on the battlefield and also at home. Putin has a very big problem on his hands which probably won't be remedied immediately by the mobilization he is making. Those forces won't be deployed quickly enough or in a good enough state to make a big difference.